Hello, everybody. I'm Stephen Hopkins, and I'm very pleased to have been invited to make this short but hopefully impactful contribution to this year's IAPC&M celebration of National Mentoring Day. I've been mentoring colleagues and clients for over 30 years, and my work's informed by a particular stance, a particular approach to the relationship between coaching and mentoring. It's an approach I find very helpful in serving those I work with. The difference between coaching and mentoring is quite a contested space, really. There are different vested interests, there are different rationales, there are different views. I've got a particular approach, a particular view, and that's what I'm going to be sharing with you today. So what follows is my position. I promote this position and I work in this way with this framework on all of my trainings and development courses that I design and deliver. And I'm presenting it today as a contribution in the spirit of food for thought. So let's have a little look at the three sections that I'm going to be looking at today. I'm going to be looking at mentoring and its relation with coaching, and that, as I described, that contested space. I'm going to be talking a little or quite a bit about my position and approach. And I'm going to be concluding or pulling together something at the end about transference and its role in mentoring, which is, you'll understand, I think, when I get to that, why I've chosen to include that. Okay. So here we have something around definitions of coaching and mentoring. I've drawn on a document produced by the National Institute of Teaching last year. I do that because my work is almost entirely as a coach mentor within the education sector. The quote there is helpful, I think, in the sense that what it's saying is that actually the approaches, be they coaching, be they mentoring, have more in common than they have in different than there are differences. The position taken in the second paragraph here, we consider it unproductive to attempt to differentiate between coaching and mentoring. I don't fully subscribe to. I think there is a way of differentiating between coaching and mentoring, but we just have to think about how we're using the language and how the language is being used within different sectors. But more of that as we progress. Some people see coaching as a component of mentoring. So a mentor does mentoring, and coaching is one of the activities that they do within that broader umbrella of mentoring. So some people would not see coaching as being one type of activity, mentoring being another. They would see it as a relationship of coaching nested within mentoring. To a degree, I see it like that, but I have rather a different take, which is the take that I draw from the source I've put at the bottom of this slide. I like to see and feel that continuum between directive and non-directive. And I see coaching as being non-directive activity, mentoring being as very directive activities. But again, I would call both of those coaching. I would see directive coaching and non-directive coaching as being a useful way forward. So this diagram really sums up my position as a coach mentor. I see that there are activities, there are ways of working with colleagues which are very directive, and there are ways of working with colleagues which are very non-directive. I call both of those coaching. I call non-directive coaching, which a lot of you will see as what you feel coaching is, but I will distinguish that from directive coaching, which is more like we're used to in terms of sports coaching, and very, very, very clear. And sometimes in terms of classrooms, when you're coaching a teacher, you're being very, very directive in terms of helping them to be successful. So more about this continuum later, but for me, the whole notion of this continuum between directive and non-directive is really, really important. There is a very useful document about mentoring by Pawson in 2004, and which has this typology of mentoring mechanisms. And within that, there is supported solution finding. I would characterize that as non-directive coaching, and there's direction setting, which is I would characterize as directive coaching. So for me, directive and non-directive coaching sit within a greater number of activities around, which is around the concept of mentoring. Mentoring is what a mentor does, and within that they do some directive coaching and they do some non-directive coaching. So when I work with clients and I work with colleagues, sometimes I'm directively coaching, sometimes I'm non-directively coaching. Sometimes they see me as a mentor, but I would still sometimes be non-directively coaching within that envelope of activities. So that's something about coaching and mentoring, and something, as I say, offered in the spirit of food for thought. Solution focused versus problem focused is something that I want to just have a little look at. I think there's a continuum between solution focused and problem focused, as in the same way there's a continuum between directive and non-directive coaching. Sometimes we work with colleagues, we work with clients in a problem-based way, where we're looking at the problem, and it's sort of underpinned by this sense of the client, the colleague's deeper understanding of the problem raises awareness and insights into where the solution might be found. So a lot of the conversation is about problem, and some of the conversation is about solution. Solution-focused work, however, is where the guiding principle is that it's the solution and getting a clarity and a sense of gravity, really gravitational pull towards the solution that actually helps things to move forward. So most of the conversation in a solution-focused way, in a solution-focused coaching approach, is solution talk with a little bit of problem talk, just really to create the context before moving to the solution. So what I'm going to be talking about today is solution-focused mentoring, which is around getting a clarity around solution. The solution-focused approach, pure solution-focused approach, is captured perhaps quite neatly within this graphic. Basically, it starts with the problem and it moves pretty quickly to off the problem to the preferred future, to the future perfect, to the vision of the solution. And that isn't a limited perfunctory sort of consideration. It's a lot of work with the clients, getting a sense of what that preferred future is, what that solution looks like, feels like, what other people would be seeing, what other people would be acknowledging, how you would be knowing that you'd arrived in that place, getting a real strong sense of direction that you wish to go in. It would then work critically round to thinking about the resources that were at the disposal of the client, the colleague, to move them from the position they're in at the moment to that clearly articulated future place. Mention there of scaling. Scaling is quite a critical tool within this approach, where you would get the client, and many of you I know will probably work in this way. You get the client or colleague to think about if the future perfect is 10 or 9, where are you now? We're at a 7. So how are you going to move from that 7 to that 10? What resources are you going to draw on? What are the action steps you're going to take? So my approach to mentoring, or rather my approach to directive coaching, is to use a solution focused way forward. This is actually a way of thinking about the steps involved in the process of directed solution-focused directive coaching. You will note that the elements on the previous slide are there, but there's an additional one, that third column of blocks and barriers I put into the solution-focused approach. So working with the client in terms of a very directive way forward is to identify the area the coachee needs to work on. The person you're working on, what do you need? What do they need to actually work on? What is the problem that you see that you are actually going to help them with? Of course, that's very different from a non-directive approach, more about that in a bit, where that would be coming from the client. It would move in the best senses of a solution-focused approach to the vision, the best hopes, and you would be articulating as that directive coach to where you need to see the coachee moving to. Yeah, what is the place that actually represents success? So there can be that sense of gap between where you're identifying the client is to where the client wants to move to. There's the resources then, which is what the resources are that are available, that the person you're working with could actually draw on to help to move that distance, to help to close that gap. But you could also work quite appropriately, I find, with the client or the colleague on what the current blocks and barriers are that are actually stopping that move from where they've identified they are to where, or where you've identified they are to where they need to be. And some of those are internal. Some of those are internal blocks and barriers. They're limiting beliefs. They're limited conceptions of themselves and what's possible. And some of them are external. So you'd work in that sort of way and then move towards priority next steps to move things forward. So that's a very directive and for many of you quite not very palatable, but it's a very, very directive approach to actually coaching somebody, but using a solution-focused approach, because it starts with a very clear articulation of the best position, the best future, the best hope for where you want to get. Of course, there are ways of doing that more directively supporting colleagues and clients, telling people what to do, which probably that sounded like that I've just been through. Nobody really likes being told what to do, but there are some ways. There are some ways of reframing some more directive steers for colleagues, and this slide sort of captures some of them. Some people say it could be said that, how would it be if? This may not be the answer for you, but let me give you an example. What I've learned is, so a sort of softer directive, but nonetheless a directive, nonetheless a drawing on the resources of expertise and experience of the person doing the directive coaching. What works for me, of course, is not as effective because it's not about what works for you. It's about because you get a lot of resistance there, and rightly so. So pre-framing your directive comments with some sort of tags on the end. Some people say that. Could that work for you? This may not be the answer for you. That can you imagine parts of it working for you? So it's a directive approach, but it's tempered a little bit with a sort of language frame that makes it a little more palatable. Here's a matrix, and you'll recognize from what we've just been through the bottom line, which is the directive. You'll also recognize, I'm sure, the top line, which is the very non-directive way of delivering the solution-focused approach. So in the non-directive way, clearly, you as the coach, you as the non-directive coach, would listen as the coachee outlines the problem challenges they need support with. So that contrasts very directly with the more directive approach, where it's the coach that identifies this is what you need to work on. In the same way as vision and best hopes, in the non-directive way, the coach would be helping the coachee to articulate a deep and rich picture of their best hopes regarding the problem, their vision, their preferred future. You wouldn't be directing that, you'd be drawing that out from them. And so we work across, and we can see the types of interaction between directive and non-directive within that approach, which is solution focused at the outset on where you want to be. What this matrix also does, helpfully, I think, is to articulate a position in the middle. And thereby, that's where you get a sense, I think, of that continuum between directive and non-directive. It is very much a continuum. It isn't necessarily one type of activity, directive coaching, what some people, I don't, but some people call mentoring, and non-directive coaching, which is what people would call coaching. It identifies a position in the middle where there's that negotiation of the territory, really, negotiation of the role. There's some adding of some contribution from you and some contribution from the client or colleague. So it's a question of moving across, backwards and forwards, directive to non-directive, depending on the needs of the client. And that's where I would go back to that first quote that I put up, which is from the National Institute of Teaching, which is saying we can consider it unproductive to differentiate. I don't consider it unproductive to differentiate, but I think the essence of where they were coming from is that it is actually a blended process, and providing the needs of the person you're working with are put first, then it's appropriate to move according to those needs and move in terms of the directive and non-directive continuum. This is an example of how it might transpire that you worked with a colleague, a client, mixing the directive and the non-directive because of their particular needs. It may be that the starting point, because of some identified problem, needs to be a very clear articulation from you of what needs to change. Yeah, I can think about that in terms of supporting newly qualified teachers in the classroom. Sometimes it's actually necessary to start very clearly by identifying the area that needs to be worked on. The best place then might be for that person to actually have an opportunity to work with you in a very non-directive way, so they are able to articulate a very, very clear to themselves vision of what good looks like effectively, or what excellence or what outstanding looks like. Where are they traveling to? Really get that deeply embedded within themselves, and you would be working in a very non-directive way with them on that. Yeah. In terms of the blocks and barriers that may be there that are likely to prevent them moving from where they are to where they need to be, or at least slow it down, maybe that's an area where there's quite a bit of directive work from you, but then a shared conversation about where they're coming from in terms of where they feel things are actually acting against their move along the getting better scale. It may then be the place to go in terms of resources to actually as the person working with the client, working with this young teacher, to say, and these are the resources that are available. These are the things you can do. These are the things I need you to do. I need you to go and make those observations of these other teachers. I need you to be able to do that, so that actually you're actually providing maximum support for that person. It may not be helpful to actually have a non-directive conversation about that at that point for that person. And then finally, in a very non-directive way, to actually work with the person you're working with to get some clarity about the actions, the next steps, what they're going to do, how they're going to work. So hopefully that shows that actually you can work in a non-directive and a directive way within a solution-focused framework, and you can actually meet the needs of the client in front of you. Yeah, it may not be the right thing to work non-directively with that client, with that problem, in that context. If for all stages, it may be important to be directive from with some aspects, which is what that articulates. So that's really my stance on coaching and mentoring. It is offered in terms of food for thought. It is offered in terms of giving you that sense of challenge around, is mentoring one thing, is coaching another? Is coaching actually better conceived of as being directive and non-directive, sat within a broader umbrella of an activity set called mentoring? And I think that is probably where I come from. And that's how I work with experienced coaches and mentors to actually get them to see the benefits of that flexibility. Here are two quotes that I enjoy very much, and two quotes that provide me with a sense of reminding me of the deeply human exchange that directive, non-directive coaching are, and that in fact, done well, both the coach and the coachee are actually being transformed, okay, to get that right and to bring the transformation of both parties out needs a recognition of that deeply human exchange that's going on. One of the aspects of that deeply human exchange is where I'd like to talk a little about is the concepts of transference. You may have spotted on the slide that I opened with, where I put a list of, yes, I'm a trainer, I'm a facilitator, I'm a coach, I'm a mentor. I also put I was a counsellor, because I am actually a trained counsellor, and I do work purely as a counsellor as part of the portfolio of work that I do. And within the training for counsellors, and certainly the practice of counselling, this concept of transference is really very, very important. A paper that this brief presentation of the concept is based on calls it the ghost in the process. And I think there's the ghost in the process always in terms of counselling. But I've come to learn that in terms of coaching, mentoring, directive, non-directive coaching, I've come to appreciate the fact that it is possible, if not always the case, there's a ghost in the process because of that deeply held exchange between the two parties. So what is going on then in terms of transference? I'll just leave that slide there for you for a moment. If you're working with somebody in the role of mentor and you're coaching them, be that directively or non-directively, your position within the organization is probably a position that is a position of greater seniority than the person you're working with. And in fact, the concept of being a mentor, that is almost a prerequisite. It is possible that the person you're working with there is some transference going on in that you're representative of the organization, positively and negatively. So you're not just being yourself, you are being a representative of the seniority of that organization. So some of the reactions and some of the responses and some of the internal thoughts of the person you're working with are likely to be based on your position within that organization. There's not very much you can do about that other than to accept that that's likely to be the case and being sensitive to the possibility around that. So it can work very positively. Clearly it can work very positively if the person you're working with has got a very good relationship generally with their organization, then and aligns well with the norms and values of the organization, then your work and their work with you as an individual is going to be contextualized by that. On the other hand, there might be some difficulties with the organization and some challenges and some misalignments in terms of norms and values between that person and the organization. And therefore, as a representative of that organization, some of what goes on may not be about you specifically, it will be about the organization. So again, quite important to be sensitive about that. But then aside from the organization, there's you as you. There is the unconscious evocation of the past in a present relationship, positively and negatively. So let's just have a think about that. Let's just think that your work with a particular client is influenced almost subconsciously by the fact that you're seen as a bit of a parent figure by that person you're working with. Now that can work very positively, but it can also work very negatively depending on what the nature of their relationship with a parent was. It could be that your work with them reminds them subconsciously of a previous mentor they had in another organization. So there's going to be some transference. There's going to be a ghost in the machine working alongside that transactional stuff that you're doing and that rapport you're building with them. There is going to be a ghost that's hanging around that could be influencing what's going on. Okay, and in the same way, the counter transference is that's going to be working in this similar way with yourself. So you may very well be working with a colleague and bringing subconsciously to the relationship the past relationship to the present relationship, be that a parent relationship, be that a past colleague, be that a partner. So it's quite helpful, actually. You can see how really, really important this is in terms of counseling, but in any helping relationship, coaching directively, non-directively, within the umbrella of being a mentor, it is possible, it is likely, to a degree, it is inevitable that this will be a dimension. Being aware of the possibility, being sensitive to the possibility helps. And I just pass that on as part of my contribution to what we've been looking at in my contribution today. So I hope you found this brief presentation interesting and helpful. I tried to put stuff together that would be impactful and that would indeed be food for thought. So thank you very much. There's my email address. If you did want to make contact, then that's how you could do it. So once again, thank you very much. And I hope this was of value and was food for thought. Thank you very much.